throwing the entire chamber into chaos would have been very detrimental for the Electoral College vote and everything else.
That was Democratic Representative Pramila Jayapal from Washington State. She's the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and she was responding to a question in an interview about her vote for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker of the House 2 years ago with Ryan Grimm of The Intercept.
Now, there were some pundits and left-wing media personalities ahead of this vote who were urging the CPC to use the vote for Speaker as leverage to extract a floor vote on Medicare for All. Why didn't the CPC end up taking that particular route?
Well, I'm sympathetic, obviously, as the lead sponsor of the bill, to people who are frustrated that we have not moved to a single-payer system yet. But the reality is that this is a very slim margin. The vote for Speaker was between Kevin McCarthy and Nancy Pelosi.
2 years later, after making a deal for the support of the 102 members then of the Congressional Progressive Caucus for their votes for Pelosi as Speaker, the bill was never introduced, and there has not been any talk of Medicare for All. The situation in the House of Representatives is now identical but reversed. A small margin here, however, is holding up the vote for Representative Kevin McCarthy as they negotiate for things that matter to their caucus. It should be noted that where Jayapal pointed to the margin between McCarthy and Pelosi as being decisive at the time, the margin now between McCarthy and Democrat Hakeem Jeffries is about 1/5 that size. For more on that, we go to the Saturday Free School in Philadelphia to speak with Professor Tony Monteiro about how to exercise power at the margins. So, Professor Monteiro, we're watching the angling going around in the House of Representatives in the process of picking a new speaker. We have all the pundits, of course, that are acting like it's some kind of tragedy that a speaker wasn't elected. This is, in fact, what some people say should have happened 2 years ago with progressives, quote unquote, and the squad, etc., when they gave Pelosi the chair when it was in the same position, more or less. And talk about what's actually happening in the real world.
Yeah, it's so interesting that the ruling elite in the mainstream media are acting like something has happened that threatens our system, and I use inverted commas there, threatened our system because, in fact, real politics have broken out. And
right.
The ruling elite that is the state, or some call it the deep state or the permanent state, controls both houses of Congress. These are people who, in the majority, vote the way lobbyists and special interest and corporate interests and military and security state interests tell them to vote. And suddenly you get a group of 20 Republicans, I think it's still 20, who are saying that no, there are other interests and other questions that have to be resolved before we go forward. In other words, the big question on the House floor is how the House will be organized and how business will be done. And this is nothing bad. It's the way it should always be. The fact that it is not is not to say that the people who are now doing it are wrong. It is saying that the way business has been conducted for too long has been wrong and has gone against the people and is really an anti-democratic way of doing business. And I guess the great example of this, and part of what the 20 are protesting, is the way this $1.7 trillion bill for funding the government was passed. Nobody debated it. Nobody knew what was in it. And in fact, it turns out that while something over $700 billion was for domestic spending, or at least that's what we're told, over $820 billion went to the military, more for military than for domestic spending. And nobody knew how the deal was cut, why so many Republicans and Democrats who claim to be anti-establishment voted for this. So I'm saying this is a good thing. We're maybe on the cusp of the 12th vote to put Kevin McCarthy as the Speaker of the House. By the way, I don't think he will get it. I think, if I were a betting person, I'd vote against him getting it. I think there are about between 5 and 7 members who say they will never vote for Kevin McCarthy. Now, last thing I would say, there are residual and strong bad feelings towards McCarthy and McConnell, the head Republican in the Senate, for the way they conducted the 2022 congressional and senatorial elections. In other words, they're saying that when it came to that election, it looked like the main thing that was driving the leadership of the House and Senate was to suppress the Trump part of the Republican Party, or what many call the populist part of the Republican Party, or as some in the media, in an attempt to discredit the populist wing of the Republican Party, call it the Putin wing. I call it the peace wing of the Republican Party.
There was yesterday on that point, a Republican from Montana, just finishing his first term, named Matt Rosendale, who was basically describing the process that legislation follows through Congress, where it is entirely handled from the top. He said, Absolutely. We have 435 people here. None of us can pass legislation. 3 or 4 people can pass legislation. We don't know what we got elected for. And more importantly, the people that elected us don't know what we got elected for.
Right. And see, these 20, and there are probably more, are saying that the way the House of Representatives has been working is against the people, is anti-democratic, as you say, authoritarian from the top down. I'm seeing this as very good. I think it is a necessary shock to the system, which could lead, at least in the framework of the way the House operates, to major changes in the way business is done. And I think one of the big things we should look at is who will be appointed to the Rules Committee of the House of Representatives. And secondly, I don't know that McCarthy has accepted this, but that any member of the House could put forward a resolution to change the Speaker whenever such a person or group of people feel that is necessary.
Right. I mean, why shouldn't they be able to do it? But
Absolutely.
The Constitution does not create a hierarchy among the members of the House.
And the other thing is, this would then make the House look more like a multi-party parliamentary system than this two-party authoritarian system.
Which, of course, anyone that knows anything about American history knows exactly that's what it was supposed to be.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for your insight. We appreciate this very much, Professor Monteiro.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate it, man.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.